Madam President, I want to go back to the point that my colleagues have made. It's fascinating to me. You didn't hear them talk for one moment about the substance of their proposals. Not a moment. Did you notice that? I wonder why that would be. I think I know. Because their proposals would take us right back to the failed policies that brought this country to the brink of economic collapse. That's what happened the last time they were in charge. They controlled both bodies from 2001 to 2006, the White House to 2008, so none of those policies they'd put in place when they controlled both chambers could be changed. And where were we at the end of 2008? Where were we? We were losing 800,000 jobs a month, and the economy was shrinking at a rate of 9%. And the proposals that they have, the substantive proposals they're making here today, take us right back to those same failed policies. So it's no wonder you don't hear them saying one word about the budget proposals we're going to be voting on, because they're the same failed policies that put this country in the ditch. Instead, what you hear them say is, we on our side have no budget. Fascinating. Well, let me just put up again what we passed last year, a law called the Budget Control Act. And let me again read from that law. It says, the allocations, aggregates, and levels, spending levels, in subsection shall apply in the Senate in the same manner as for a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012. In the next clause, it makes the exact same statement for 2013, that the Budget Control Act that was passed last year will serve in the same manner as a budget resolution. And earlier this year, pursuant to that law, I gave the appropriators, which I am required to do under the law, what they could spend. And here it is. I've got this chart being blown up. Agriculture, nutrition, and forestry, $13,397 million. Armed services, $146,698 million. Banking, housing, and urban affairs, $22,167 million. Commerce, science, and transportation, they get $15 billion and $16 million. Energy and natural resources, $5,276 million. Sounds kind of like a budget, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound kind of like a budget? Well, guess what? It is a budget. And it's in the Budget Control Act that we passed last year instead of a budget resolution. Now, again, anybody that's taken high school civics knows a budget law is stronger than any budget resolution. Why would that be the case? Because a budget resolution is purely a congressional document, never goes to the president for his signature. A budget law, by definition, has to be signed by the president. So last year, instead of a budget resolution, we passed a budget law called the Budget Control Act. Pursuant to that law, I gave the appropriators earlier this year, before the deadline, their allocations. And I was just reading from them. Finance, $1,337,888. Foreign relations, $28,640,000,000. Homeland Security, $102,276,000,000. The Judiciary Committee, $18,545,000,000. Rules and Administration, $41 million. Sounds a lot like a budget, doesn't it? Because that's exactly what it provided. It provided the spending limits for this year and for next year. That's in the Budget Control Act that we passed in the United States Senate last year on a strong bipartisan vote, passed the House of Representatives, signed into law by the President of the United States. So when we hear over and over there's no budget, no spending limits for this year, it's just not so. There are spending limits for this year. There are spending limits for next year. They are included in the Budget Control Act, which is a law. It was passed. It was signed by the President. Madam President, it also, that Budget Control Act, limited spending for the next 10 years, put spending caps in place. Budget resolutions rarely have spending caps for more than 1 year. The Budget Control Act had 10 years of caps, saving $900 billion. That's the law. I see the senator from Michigan is on the floor, a very valued member of the Budget Committee. Welcome to this debate. We've been hearing a lot from the other side. Interestingly enough, I want to say to the senator, almost nothing about the substance of their proposals. I assume that's because they want to go back to the same failed policies that put this country in the ditch that we're still digging out of. All they want to talk about is not having a budget resolution. Not one word that instead of a budget resolution, we passed a budget law, as you well know, the Budget Control Act. Madam President, just to respond to my friend, the ranking member of the committee, and I've got a lot of respect for the ranking member. Truth is, on the larger issue, we're not all that far apart on the larger issue. Larger issue is, as a nation, we're on an unsustainable course. It's as clear as it can be. And we've got to deal with it. We have a difference with respect to what we've got right now. I believe we do have a budget in place for this year and next year. The place where I would agree with the gentleman is we don't have the longer-term plan. The problem is, are we really going to get all sides to get off their fixed positions right before a national election? And that's a matter of judgment. I don't believe that it's going to happen. I was part of the Simpson-Bowles Commission. In fact, Senator Gregg and I are the ones that got a commission appointed. And he and I were 2 of the 11 votes in favor of the long-term plan that Bowles-Simpson put before the American people. 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 1 independent. And that would have reduced the debt from what it would otherwise be by more than $4 trillion. Depending on what baseline you use, even more than that. And that's the minimum we need to do. I actually tried to convince the commission to do $5.6 trillion. That was my proposal to the commission. A $5.6 trillion package of deficit reduction and debt reduction. Why did I pick that? Because we could balance the budget in 10 years if we did. But I do want to go back to this question about whether we've got a budget right now for this year. And I really say, with respect, I believe it's very clear we do. The Budget Control Act, not a budget resolution, but a law, said very clearly that the allocations, aggregates, and levels of spending shall apply in the Senate in the same manner as for a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012. That identical language follows for 2013. Let's put up the next, and so, pursuant to the Budget Control Act, in April, I provided to the appropriators and the authorizers these budget allocations for appropriations. For Security Discretionary Budget Authority for 2013, $546 billion. For Non-Security Discretionary Budget Authority, $501 billion. That's a total of, on budget, of $1,040,954. Mandatory spending, $815,671 billion, for a total of $1,862,671 million. Then to the authorizing committees. I went through some of these numbers previously. The Agriculture, Nutrition, Forestry, $13,397 million. On entitlements for that same committee, $124,580 million. On armed services, $146,698 million. On banking, housing, and urban affairs, $22,167 million. Again, I could go through every committee, but there it is. I mean, the appropriations spending limits have been provided to the appropriators. The authorizing committees have been given their designations. So for this year, we have spending limits. Now, I see Senator Paul is here, and it's his time, so I thank the senator for his courtesy. I would just say, for this year and next, it's clear we have spending limits put in place. What we don't have is the longer-term plan. That's where I would agree with the gentleman. And the question is there any prospect of the two sides coming together, getting off their fixed positions right now? I doubt that very much.